Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree, and today I'm reminiscing what it was like going fishing. If you're not familiar with fishing, it's basically a sport or pastime where you go out to a body of water, presumably filled with, living creatures known as fishes or fish, and you attempt to catch said fish. Now, there's lots of different methods of doing so, boating, fly fishing, taking nets, dynamite, whatever. I referenced dynamite, that's from Crocodile Dundee 2. But, whoops, there went my camera. What about my personal experiences going fishing? Well, as you're very familiar, if you watch any of my videos, you know I grew up dirt-ass poor. And basically what that means is we didn't really have the money to do fishing recreationally like some people would have. For us, it was a fucking necessity. If we wanted to eat, we had to go to the lake and catch some goddamn catfish, or we weren't eating that day. So, fishing was a way of life for us. It was a necessity. It was like, hey, you won't go hunting because I refuse to carry a gun and shoot animals. So, my dad was like, alright, let's go catch some catfish, because I was willing to do that. Now, I was willing to throw the line into the river, or lake, or pond, or whatever body of water we were, close enough to that we could, attempt to fish. But I wasn't going to do any of the post-catching prep work. The scaling, the gutting, etc. No, I'm not cleaning the fish. I'm not doing none of that. I hand that off to Mom, and I'm like, here you go. Here's my bucket of fish. You can do the rest. Now, that being said, you can't really, you can live on fish, obviously. It's protein. But you don't want to eat fish every day. So, while it was somewhat of a necessity, it was like, hey, we do have, limited money for food. We had food stamps, etc. So we were able to get, like, bread, oatmeal, beans, rice, etc. But, like, you want meat. And they're not giving you meat at the food bank. Well, they weren't back in the day. Maybe a bucket of, or a jar of peanut butter. That's your protein. A couple of cans of beans. So fishing was one of those things we did, to supplement our food options, At least until Mom and Dad got to a point where they could, they had better incomes, and they could supply us with better food options, which eventually they did. But when we were really young, when they were just starting out, both high school dropouts, no education, no real experience to speak of, and they had 4 kids, they struggled for a few years. Now, unfortunately for me, I've told several stories in this regard. I'm pretty clumsy. And so, I was not very proficient at fishing. Overall, in my entire life, I am 41 years old, for those who were curious. I have gone to the body of water with a fishing pole with intent to fish a grand total of maybe 10 to 15 times in my life. It was not a regular occurrence for me. Now, Dad and his brothers, my uncles, would go fishing all the damn time. But it was not a regular occurrence for them to drag me along, because they knew, 1, I was going to break the fishing pole, or 2, I was going to get the fishing line stuck in the tree, which was going to necessitate them cutting the fishing line and then spending an unnecessary amount of time fixing it and getting it repaired so that I could go back to not catching fish because I was never good at catching fish. In the whole time I've fished, which is, like I said, between 10 to 15 times total in my life, no more than one day at a time, usually for just a few hours at a time, I've caught at most maybe 4 fish in my life. None of them were prize-winning fish, and none of them tasted that good. They weren't very good fish. So I was not proficient at fishing. I wasn't very good at it. I enjoyed going to the lake, sitting on the beach, throwing the line into the water, and just sitting there having a root beer, or until I was old enough, Bud Light or whatever. And just peacefully enjoying the summer breeze. I did enjoy that aspect of fishing. I was not one to bait my own hook. I was not touching the worms, and I was not puncturing the worms with the hook. So I would usually have to hand off my fishing rod to somebody else, usually one of my cousins or brothers-in-law, I don't know the correct grammatical phrasing, or one of my uncles, my dad, etc. Somebody else who was on the fishing trip would have to bait the hook for me. I was not going to touch the worms. Or any other bait. Now, I was fine with going out in the backyard with the water hose and mudding the backyard, the dirt, to get the worms to pop up out of the ground and, take a styrofoam cup and a spoon and go digging for worms. I was okay with that part of it. But actually getting to the lake and putting it on the hook, no thank you. I ain't doing it. One, I ain't touching worms. And two, I don't want to puncture them because it's kind of cruel. Having somebody else do it for me, I'm like, okay, I'm absolved of the crime. Likewise, if I ever did catch a fish, I would bring it in, drop it into the bucket, and someone else would have to get it off the hook. I wasn't touching the goddamn thing either. That was never gonna fucking happen. Not even if I was wearing gloves. Never gonna happen. Which, I don't know if you can remove the hook if you're wearing gloves. I don't know if you have... Well, I don't know if I have the finger agility to be able to do that. So, again, that was the part of the fishing that I was not capable of doing. So, the other people who went fishing with me really didn't like having me around because I wouldn't touch the hook and I wouldn't touch the fish. So, it was a lot of me pestering other people for help. And they didn't want to help me because they were like, do it yourself. And I'm like, no. You dragged my ass along. You're going to help me. And they were like, blah, 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 blah. So needless to say, they would go fishing without extending me an invitation more often than not. Because they didn't want to hassle with it. And I didn't want to hassle with it. So it was like, fine by me. Now, from an ethical standpoint, I don't necessarily have any objections to fishing. I think it's a perfectly legit pastime. If done right, If you're fishing first of all, legally with a fishing license, and fishing for species that are authorized to be fished, I'm okay with it. Especially if you're either, one, going to catch and release and you're just doing it for the sport, or two, you're actually going to cook the fucking thing when you get it home. As long as if you are doing catch and release, you do it ethically, as well as if you are going to cook it, you kill it ethically. You know what I mean? As best as possible. Now, obviously, I'm a meat eater, and I'm a firm believer that at the top of the food chain, humans have a, inherent natural right to eat other animals because that's how we've evolved. And that's like our nature. So, it's not for everybody, but I do somewhat enjoy going fishing. There's just parts of the fishing activity I'm not going to participate in. Just because it's not something I want to do. I've never gone fishing on a boat. I've never tried fly fishing. It looks way complicated for me. So I'm of the opinion that if you enjoy it, good for you. It's just not something I'm good at, and there's parts of it I'm unwilling to participate in. So I'm not the best person to take along on a fishing trip, unfortunately.